I've just started the Hymany Way on the outskirts of Portumna after walking back out there this morning, and feels good to be back not on solid tarmac again, and with the advent of the stiles, really happy about that. So as you can see, I've got a road beside me here, but electing to take the softer surface of the path that I'm intended to be on. It's top of what looks like a flood levee the whole way along the banks of the Shannon, which is just lapping up here along the side of my feet. Not quite my feet, but you know what I mean. The bottom of the flood levee, just in there. Through the trees is the actual open river, and that's we'll see it in a second, but that's the view that would have been in front of O'Sullivan Beare and his men 400 plus years ago. Most of the rivers up to now have been reasonably small and reasonably easily accessible across, but this was the first real major challenge that O'Sullivan Beare and his men faced. We're going to meet a few people later on who are going to tell us a bit more about it, but right now all we can do is just look at it in the same amazement and wonder how we're going to get across as O'Sullivan Beare did. You can imagine the fear that set in when O'Sullivan and his men reached the Shannon here behind me. It's such a massive river, trying to get across that. Oh no, wait, hang on. No, sorry. This is the Shannon over here. Sorry, my mistake. That one, not so much, it's just a little drain. This one, however, would pose a bit of a problem for anybody who arrived without a boat. It looks pretty docile today, but in the days of O'Sullivan it would have been pretty fast moving. It also would have been much wider because modern management of the rivers has meant it's been I suppose narrowed up in places. This would have been a quarter of a mile, 400 meters across, and he would have been on the opposite bank there, mind you, a little bit downstream, so further down this direction, and he would have been trying to get from the far side of the river to this side of the river with what remained of his forces at that time, somewhere in the region of about 500 people. At the same time being attacked from that side of the river and on the near side, the Connacht side, as they got across. There's some fascinating stories. We're going to meet Pat a little later on. He's going to tell us a few stories about the area. But the crossing of the Shannon is probably the biggest adventure of the entire 14 days O'Sullivan Beare spent on the road or on the trail. They had to kill animals. They had to evade attack. They made 2 boats. Look at that beautiful swan. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's just making the most amazing noises. That's beautiful. That sort of adventure, that sort of wildlife, that sort of animal life has been evident the whole way along the trail. Absolutely beautiful. And you don't know when to expect it. It just kind of pops out of nowhere. So we're back on the banks of the Shannon, and on the far side of the river, which would have been at the time of O'Sullivan Beare about 400 meters across, a quarter of a mile across, and they fashioned 2 boats, one with 11 horse-hides by the O'Sullivan clan and one by the O'Malleys of Connacht, who were mercenaries in the employment of O'Sullivan, and they built their boat with single horsehide. Now what happened was, the bigger boat in 30s, I suppose the group at the time would have been in the region of 280 soldiers and about the same of just civilians coming along with them, down from the 1,000 that had been on the route from Glengarriff. They were now about half of that strength, about 400 or 500 people, and they would have come from the far side of the river. The smaller boat and the 10 men in it capsized and were drowned, and the rest were ferried overnight in the 30 at a time in the bigger boat. Now, the O'Sullivan's method of movement the whole way through was to have a good number of his soldiers at the front, civilians and all the stocks in the middle, and the remainder of his soldiers at the back, and that was to ward off attacks from either the front or the back, whatever end they came from. And what ended up happening in practice was the McGeegans, who lived in the castle to the east on the Tipperary side of the river, they attacked as the majority had crossed. It was needless. It was really just a stunt to show the English how much they supported them. But the O'Sullivans left on the far side of the river, waiting to be the final ones to cross, attacked back and ended up killing the entire McGeegan clan, including the leader. It was a needless attack and a needless massacre, but O'Sullivan lost no men in that battle. It was the less able McGeegans who ended up finding their way to their eternal rest. On this side of the river, the O'Maddens also encouraged O'Sullivan and his men to move quickly along and made it quite easy, although O'Sullivan and his men did plunder a local village for food and supplies along the way. Once west of the Shannon, the flatter terrain, but also less concern about the garrison towns on the other side of the Shannon, the likes of Athlone, they were less of a concern, and O'Sullivan could make his way with a little more safety until he got as far as Aughrim. We're going to talk about that a little bit further down the trail. Look who came out to say hello. We're going to take a little bit of a walk past some sheep. There's some sheep on the trail who are probably going to make their escape as I get closer to them. Yep, there we go. And they're just heading off down the walkway, in fact, that I should be on, but I decided I'd give them a bit of peace and quiet, but that didn't really work. So I am just on the outskirts of Malik. I have about a 10-minute walk into the village from here, and this is pretty iconic because you'll see over behind me here there's a loch on the Shannon called Victoria Loch. Now I'm standing in County Galway, which is in Connacht. That loch over there is in County Offaly, which is in Leinster, the province of Leinster, and then everything over there, those trees and everything like that, that's all in Tipperary, which is the Connacht, which is the province of Munster. So in the middle here you'll see a couple of islands. On one of those islands, I'm not quite sure which one, I've nobody with the exact local knowledge with me right now, but it's one of those islands, I think it's the far one with the tallest tree on it, is actually in all three Irish provinces and three different Irish counties. It's the closest we have. There obviously is another point where Connacht and Leinster also meet Ulster, somewhere along the path, somewhere probably around Longford, Fermanagh, Cavan, that kind of direction, not a million miles from where I live, but this is pretty unique and pretty iconic. But it also means I'm getting closer to home.